Welcome to First Parish in Needham, a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1711, along with the town of Needham. We are a proud LGBTQ welcoming congregation, climate justice seeking green sanctuary, and level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation for immigration justice. Whoever you are, whatever your background, and wherever you're watching from, you are welcome here. My name is David Berman. I'm a member of our worship committee and a facilitator for one of our small group ministries. As you know, what's happening right now at the congregation is very different from the usual because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although our building is closed, our faith community is open. We hope all of you will plug into our Zoom gathering opportunities throughout the week, including Zoom social hour immediately following today's service. And since we're recording this in advance, our candles of joy and concern will be done live during the social hour. You can learn more about all that's happening at First Parish by going to our website, uuneedham.org, or by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. To get the Zoom links, please sign up for our weekly email newsletter by going to our website and clicking Get Involved Newsletter, or sending your request to office@uuneedham.org. Our sincere hope is that these online services and connection opportunities will help us keep the physical distance required during this pandemic without losing much of the spiritual, emotional, and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. If you're watching this service as it live streams, please take a moment now to say hello and introduce yourself in the YouTube chat box. Leading our service today will be Elizabeth Foster. Elizabeth is a former DRE and current UU seminarian at the Boston University School of Theology. Her research focuses on progressive Unitarian and Universalist involvement with the eugenics movement in the 1920s and how we can come to terms with and learn from our history. She serves as intern minister for Equal Access, that's equal spelled with UU, and president of the BU Cross Disability Club. Elizabeth lives in Cambridge with her cat Jade. Welcome again to everyone, and good morning. This morning, we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words from Reverend Laura Thompson, who serves as head minister for the Minnesota Valley UU Fellowship in Bloomington, Minnesota. Across the distance, the light from within me shines, sending love to all. Across the distance, your light is fuel that warms me and helps to keep my own light burning. Together, we keep the flame of community burning bright.
Please join me in singing our first hymn, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire, which is a quotation from the New Testament's 1 Corinthians chapter 13. The text was revised and set to music by prolific Presbyterian composer and choir director Hal Hobson.
To all inspire. In Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of the church strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as printed in your emailed order of service. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. And we gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we are living these promises every day.
How to Catch a Star by Oliver Jeffords. Once there was a boy, and the boy loved stars very much. Every night the boy watched the stars from his window and wished he had one of his very own. He dreamed of how this star would be his friend. They would play hide-and-go-seek and take long walks together. The boy decided he would try to catch one. He thought that getting up early in the morning would be best, because then the star would be tired from being up in the sky all night. So the next day he set out at sunrise, but he could not see a star anywhere. So he sat down and waited for one to appear. He waited, and he waited, and he ate lunch, and he waited, and after dinner, he waited some more. Finally, just before the sun was about to go away, he saw a star. The boy tried to jump up and grab it, but he could not jump high enough. So very carefully, he climbed to the top of the tallest tree he could find, but the star was still way out of reach. He thought he might lasso the star with the life preserver from his brother's boat, but it was much too heavy for him to carry. If only he could fly up in a spaceship and just grab the star, but the only spaceship he owned was made of paper and it didn't fly well at all. Perhaps he could get a seagull to help him fly up into the sky to reach his star, but the only seagull he could find didn't want to help at all. The boy worried that he would never catch a star. But just then he noticed something floating in the water. It was the prettiest star he had ever seen. Just a baby star. It must have fallen from the sky. He tried to fish it out with his hands, but when the boy reached out to touch the star, it just rippled through his fingers. Now the boy was sad, but in his heart the wish wouldn't give up. Slowly he began walking home. And that's when he saw it, washed up on the bright golden sand. The boy had caught a star of his very own. The end. We will be sharing our joys and concerns as a part of coffee hour this morning, but for the moment, let us join together in a spirit of prayer and contemplation. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all we rest in this love. In words adapted from Molly Brewer, "My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. All I can ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. Amen." Now, please join us in singing meditative hymn number 210, Wade in the Water. This hymn is a slave spiritual from the mid-1800s in America with coded meaning. It is a religious song recalling both the Exodus account of the Israelites' escape from Egypt and the Gospel of John account, where stepping in the water troubled by the divine can heal. But wade in the water had a second meaning for slaves dreaming of escape to freedom. Take to the water to throw off the pursuing bloodhounds and find Harriet Moses Tubman and other Israelite helpers along the Underground Railroad.
This congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of the church, offer what we can to build and sustain the congregation and the world we envision. This month, our collections will be split 50-50 with Pathways Family Shelter. During the COVID-19 pandemic, even more families are experiencing homelessness, and traditional shelters can be scary and unfriendly, especially for children. Pathways Family Shelter provides a communal living space with private family rooms to help 14 families at a time get through the difficult times they are facing. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of 3 different methods. You can use our Text to Give program through the number 73256 with the exact wording of UU Needham space plate or pledge 21 space $, and the amount you want to give. You can mail a check to First Parish at 23 Dedham Avenue, or you can make a donation through our website, uuneedham.org, and select Donate Now under the Giving box. Whichever way, remember to specify whether your donation is meant for the plate collection or for your annual pledge. Thank you for everything you are able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments to give what you can and know it will be gratefully received.
There are years that ask questions and years that answer. So Zora Neale Hurston tells us towards the beginning of her classic novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I reread this novel recently for the first time since high school for a course on Black Lives Matter and theology, and was profoundly moved by it. But I hadn't paid much attention to this specific line until I encountered it again serendipitously a few weeks later in a blog post by the Reverend Chantel Hinton Hill on Justice Unbound, an online journal for womanist theology. She wrote there about how this line has influenced her thinking about 2020, the meaning of the Christmas story, and the nature of faith. She writes, "The movements we are seeing now, movements for fair pay for women, movements for Black lives, movements for protected land and environmental justice, whose years of waiting, watching, and working God's plan compelled God to finally show up and show out. And to be clear, these are not the kind of prayers that only require us to look pretty on Sundays. These are the kind of prayers that mean showing up with our feet, the kind of prayers that cost you something, the kind of prayers that look like public protests and a willingness to put your privilege on the line. That's the kind of prayers I'm talking about." And after I read her piece, I couldn't get the line out of my head either. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. As Reverend Hinton Hill suggests, this past year has asked a great many questions of us all. Some have been personal questions such as, how can I support my children with virtual learning while also working remotely? When will I finally see my best friend who lives in another state again? Will I have trouble with my rent or my mortgage if this goes on? Will I be okay? Will my family, our community? And some have been big systemic questions such as, how do we handle it when our fellow citizens deny public health recommendations and do not look out for the communal good? Why did it take us so long to acknowledge the violence experienced by Black and disabled Americans at the hands of the police? What can we do to change this? How could we let things come to this? We are none of us where we expected to be this year. Even those of us who have been fortunate enough to come through this time relatively unscathed have been grappling with disrupted routines, canceled trips to see loved ones, postponed weddings and graduations and holidays. I read a story earlier in the service about a boy whose heart's desire was to catch and befriend a star. But for much of the story, no matter how many different ways he tries, he can't find a way to reach the star he sees in the sky at all. And when he finally did manage to meet a star, it was not at all in the way he expected. And he had to do a whole lot of waiting first. First, he waited for morning to come so he could look for a tired star. And then he waited all day long for a star to appear. And then he waited through his failed attempts to reach a star in the sky. And then, even when he found the star that was destined to be his friend, not in the sky, but in the ocean, he had to wait yet again to actually meet the star. For most of us, too, this has very much been a year of waiting and of searching for things we very much wanted but couldn't necessarily find. And it has also been a year of trying over and over and not giving up and believing that we too will find what we are looking for eventually, perhaps also in an unexpected place. And when we look to our own Unitarian Universalist sources, we find models for how to think about this sort of waiting. Just a week ago, we passed the longest night of the year, celebrated as the winter solstice in many pagan traditions. These traditions teach us that the cold lifelessness of winter is part of an essential cycle of the waning and rebirth of the sun, and that waiting for the sun to rise again is an important part of this process. One story of the solstice from these traditions, as told by Starhawk, goes that at solstice time, the sun grows very tired of shining and providing energy for the earth all year, and so she rests in the arms of Mother Night. On the longest night, the people keep watch with candles which are a spark of the sun's own fire, and they thank the sun for everything that she has done that year. With their gratitude and seeing themselves reflected in the candles, the sun begins to feel younger and younger until she is reborn on the morning of the solstice and begins to grow strong once again. The long night of uncertainty and doubt is frightening, and the people ask themselves questions accordingly. Is this the year the sun will be too tired to ever come back? But in the end, the people's patience and faith through a time of rest and darkness is what helps the sun to be reborn every time. The Advent season is another source of wisdom about this kind of sacred waiting. When I was a director of religious education, I struggled a little bit with how best to teach my kids about the meaning of the Advent story. We made lanterns and decorated cookies, and we talked about how it might have felt to be different characters in the Christmas story anticipating this miraculous new birth. Our modern Advent traditions, like Advent calendars and lighting weekly candles, ritualize this waiting to emphasize its importance to the Christmas story. We do not get to the miraculous baby in the manger without Mary and Joseph's determination to undertake a long, uncertain journey, without the shepherds and the Magi's willingness to put their faith in a sign and completely disrupt their normal activities. The story would not be possible at all without the waiting and disruption that precedes it. And so, while we must grieve everything and everyone we lost this past year, I urge you to also nourish the hope that this period of waiting and questioning can lead us to something better, perhaps even something that feels miraculous, like a new life coming into the world, or like the sun being reborn. But for that to happen, as both of these traditions warn us, it is not a passive sort of waiting that we must be engaged in. We must anticipate a more hopeful and just time, absolutely, but we must also work towards it together to make it come about. 2020 was a year that asked a number of painful questions that needed to be asked. And the answers can compel us to take action to heal the things that we've realized are currently broken. Perhaps you learned that you had been trying to do too much before the pandemic and have vowed to kind of find a way to keep a slower pace even when it isn't imposed on you. Perhaps you learned more about the Black Lives Matter movement and have committed yourself to supporting it. Perhaps you learned about disability justice in the wake of the pandemic and plan to share this awareness with others. Perhaps amid the grief and uncertainty of this year, you found unexpected moments of joy and connection. And perhaps you didn't. Perhaps the most important thing that you have done this year is made it through. And that too is something valuable. And whatever we have learned or done or not done, here we are at the end of the year together. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. Of course, things are not really so clear-cut. Every year, even this one, is a jumbled mix of questions and answers, joy and despair, justice and cruelty and compassion. 2020 did not ask all of the questions that we need to ask ourselves and our society, and I'm certain that 2021 won't provide us with all of the answers we're seeking. But the fact that we are committed to continuing to seek and work towards those answers together as a community, that's the thing that matters most. If you've ever read Their Eyes Were Watching God, which I highly recommend, you'll know that it is at heart a love story, and a story about finding love despite oppression through racism and sexism and natural disasters. And that is what your community and communities all over the country and all over the world are doing together right now. Despite the pandemic, despite police brutality and poverty and injustice, you have been showing up for one another however you can, by social distancing, by writing letters and postcards, by protests and activism, by bringing food and supplies to neighbors, and by gathering together on Zoom, just as we are right now. Together, we are engaged in acts of holy waiting, and together, we will work towards the answers we need, even if they surprise us. Amen, and may it be so. Now, please join me in singing hymn number 1018, Come and Go With Me. This hymn is a Southern African American spiritual. In the African American lectionary, Bernice Johnson Reagan, founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, writes, "As a child, I was sure it must be heaven that we were being called to consider. No pain, no sickness, nothing but joy. We are called to understand that journeying toward that land requires us to actually engage in the courageous work of creating that which we seek, the unity of humanity."
As we close our worship today, please remember to keep a careful eye out for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media so you can keep up with opportunities for connection with your faith community during these times of physical isolation. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to read your whole bell notes each week for links and opportunities to connect. When today's service ends, you're all invited to join us for our Zoom social hour, and you can find the link for that in your Saturday bell notes. Please remember, if you fall ill or need any pastoral support, to reach out to our pastoral care team and caring crew via phone or email. We also encourage all of you strongly to check in with your friends at First Parish and to double check your own contact information in our online Realm directory if you have not done so recently. At this time, when we can only convene by phone call, email, and video chat, we want to be particularly sure that we know how to reach out to each other. I miss you all more every week. We always extinguish our chalice with words promising to carry its flame in our hearts until we are together again. And I know that I and you and all of us are deeply committed to that promise, no matter how long it is until we are together again. So as we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying those words as printed in your emailed order of service, written by Unitarian Universalist Minister Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Despite the many painful questions this past year has asked of us, take heart in knowing that we will answer them together. Go in peace, go in justice, and go in love.
There's a sweet, sweet spirit in this place, and I know that it's the Spirit of the Lord. There's a sweet expression on each face, and I know that it's the Spirit of the Lord. Sweet Holy Spirit, sweet heavenly dove, stay right here with us, filling us with your love. And for those blessings, we lift our hearts with praise. Without a doubt, we'll know that we have been revived when we shall leave this place.